All right, so now we're going to go into the initial mix of the to make these two kilo loaves. And in doing so, it's a 90-10 ratio of your high gluten flour to your whole wheat flour. You can play with that. You can beef up the whole wheat some, and in fact, the bacteria and the yeast like the richer kernel of the whole wheat flour. So I usually round up on the whole wheat and round down on the white. But nonetheless, the basic tartine recipe is 90% white flour by weight and 10% whole wheat flour. The high gluten flour is, actually there's not gluten in the flour. There's two what are they, amino acids, the proteins in the flour, glutenin and gliadin. And when those get activated with moisture, they end up combining to form gluten. And it's the gluten that adds the strength to the dough. If you don't have gluten, you have crumb. If you don't have gluten, you have pastry, you have shortbread, you have cookies. Neither would you want to use high gluten flour to make nobody really wants a chewy pie. So the gluten and the process by which we bring this bread into life is a matter of creating the glutens and aligning the strands of the glutens. The glutens seal the bread to trap the gases and to allow for the elasticity that allows the bread to expand. So we're going with the 90% high gluten flour. Tear my scale with that bowl. And I'm going for, in this case, I'm doing 900 grams of the white flour, the high gluten white flour, and again, I'll just end up with, I end up with like 850. And then I've got my, just 100 grams, whoopsie, 100 grams of whole wheat. Heavier than it seems. It's amazing how much that weighs. And then we have warm water. How warm? Depends on how fast you want it to work out for yourself. If it's your hot tub, when you can't stand to get in, is about 102 degrees. You don't really want it hotter than the hot tub that you can barely stand to get in. But you could be working with 80 and 85 degrees as well. It's probably, but if you're in a big hurry, you're trying to get something done, you can start with some warmer water. Your starter that goes in there is probably going to cool it down some. It's going to cool down some by the time it, so shoot for 90 to 100 degrees in the water. Now, so I've got this, now I've got 1,000 grams in here. I'm going to match that up with, hold on, 700, I'm going to be 700 grams of water. You can go to 750 if you want, but it's a 75% moisture content. And then I'm going to be increasing it more later when I add the salt and additional water. So I'm just going to pump that up to 1750. It's a decent idea to weigh your water first.
I always weigh my water first and separately and not with
my trusty assistant always weighs the water first because she's...
I recommend weighing the water first, not in the flour.
I haven't yet introduced my trusty assistant. That would be Janet O'Connor over here. When I learned to make this bread, it was something that I could do. Janet didn't make bread. She didn't bake. She's a cook. She doesn't do this stuff. So I started this without her, and like most of my projects, once I figure out how to do it, I throw it over my shoulder, and Janet does all the work. Okay, that's my system. So here I am with my 700 grams of water. I just put 700, and I could add more later if I want to. And I need about a dollop of my leavening that I created.
We'll give you some better measurements.
No, dollop's good. Let's see how much that dollop weighs once I get it in there. The dollop's worth. I would normally, back in the kitchen, and it was 200 grams. I'd say 300 grams is good. 300-gram dollop of my leavening. Remember, I'm a one-trick pony. You can criticize me all you want. I don't want to hear it. Just tell other people. So now I've got that all mixed. I'm going to just stir this all up. Now, the next phase, after I get this all mixed up, the next phase is a rest. This thing is going to rest. I'm going to mix this up, and it's going to be a batter. It seems too thick. Now I cut it out, I left out 50 grams of water. So I think I need 50 grams. That's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. My trusty assistant was a little tense right there. My style is a little freestyle. Now, here's where my trusty assistant and I agree. We like using our hands. And when you're making your starter, if you're making your own starter at home, use your hands for that. It needs bacteria. Now, I washed my hands a while ago, and I haven't done anything since, but I would reach into this bowl of water, get it nice and wet, and I just mix this thing up, because that's what it wants. It wants to be mixed well here. You see, that's much better than that stupid spatula, although I'm going to make quite a mess of my hands in the process. But here I am stirring it up. See, that's looking good now. See, that's starting to, that's looking good. I probably put too much water. I should have listened to my trusty assistant. So I got this all mixed up. That's as good as it gets there. See,
We will send instructions. But that is what you want. That's what you're looking for.
That's what I'm looking for. See how that is nice
It's
and
all just kind of together.
it's mixed up.
It's all mixed up. There's no dry parts. There's no overly wet parts. That's the other reason I like using my hands, is that
You want to come over here where you're on camera, where you're talking to these people?
can you see me?
Why don't you talk to them while I rinse my hands off?
Well, it's your hands. So hands are good. Hands are good because you can feel it, and you can feel if it's all mixed evenly and thoroughly, and there aren't any dry spots, or as I like to say, sometimes you get the little clumps. I feel it. I kind of almost use a cat motion. I think of the cat kneading, and when I do that, I'm feeling kind of through the dough. So I'm just kind of feeling through the dough. I'm making sure that if there's any flour balls, that they've been popped or dissipated, and that the water's going everywhere, and it starts to feel like it's one unit, and that's really where you want to get to. When it's one unit, then that is good for the next thing. These are great because just get a little water on it, cleans up, nice and easy, gets the sides down. So my one is almost ready for the next phase.
I don't think so. There's my bowl. I'm just going to cover that. I'm going to set it aside for half an hour now. That's called the autolyse. It's resting. It's transmogrifying into a living organism, a single living organism. It's starting to divide. Its cells, it's combining those glutens, but it's resting. It's a half-hour rest. And then we get to the phase of adding the salt and and additional water. The salt, actually, I hear different things about this, but the salt actually fortifies the glutens. It actually makes the gluten stronger. So it does more than just add flavor. Is this ready for the...
That is ready?
Let's put it in my pretty bowl.
Yes, put it here. So this is a batch that I started a half an hour ago.
It's been resting.
So it's been resting, so it's been through that phase, and now we're going to add the salt.
Which I don't have.
Okay.
I need salt. Yes. So the tartine recipe recommends 20 grams of salt.
And we're doing 20.
And I'm doing 25. Excuse me all the pieces.
And then just 50 grams
grams, and then just 50 grams of water on top of it. So I've got 25 grams of, now I'm gonna do my water separately because I really hate when I mess this up. So I'm putting in my 50 grams of water. Look at, I hit that first time. And I like to mix these up first to dissolve them in here. Now, America's Test Kitchen reviewed the tartine recipe, and let's see, I grab one of those scrapers, is that handy? And they criticized it. They said that it needed more kneading in the earlier phases. Tartine only did stuff with the stretching and the mixing and so forth. But in these first phases, now you see this bread now, as compared to the, if I take this guy out that is just entering its auto release, it's just it's just got this going on, right? But now after half an hour, this stuff is all starting to form as a single living unit here. I've got the salt and the water that I'm mixing in, and so what I do is I stretch that, I don't know if you can see, I stretch that and push that in, stretch it and push it in. Some folks say that there isn't any compaction that's necessary, any kneading that's necessary, because the moisture is actually what's aligning the glutens or forming the glutens. But then I've also read that the stretching and compacting crushes those glutenins and glutens together that form those glutens. And the stretching is what helps align those gluten strands so that they form actual strength. And as I'm doing this, you'll see that that's forming a really nice little ball. Isn't that pretty? So this is going to end up being your 2 loaves of bread. Now, that's how that's going to sit now, and we're going to go into it a half hour later. And we're going to, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of stretches and compaction with decreasing violence. So my first half hour after I do this, I'm going to go back after it again. I'm going to pull this out, I'm going to crush it down, I'm going to go through all of this mixing again, and then I'm going to, and then the second half hour, maybe I'll just start stretching it out there and folding it. And then the third half hour, I start treating it much more tenderly and so forth. So I'm doing, and this is not.
You can show them what you do in the second half hour with this one.
Okay. That's ready to go? Okay. So none of this is, what I've learned is that getting after it early, in those early increments, is the most important. If you tail off a little bit with your third half hour, or your first 1 hour. I go 4 half-hour segments and 2 one-hour segments. You can tail off just a little bit or start to stretch those out, but those first half-hour increments are really important for what's being built here in this bread. So I've got this now ready to wait for a half an hour, and at the end of that half an hour, little beauty in here. Look at that solid living unit. Now, half hour later, it looks much the same. Probably because Janet mixed it and I didn't, so it's not nearly as good. But we don't, she's in the other room, so I'm safe to say that. So we're starting to get the strength, and it'll web nicely for us as we stretch that out there. You're seeing that those glutens are holding that together. This thing is stretchy now, quite a bit more stretchy than it was. So what we do in this initial mix is we stretch that out there and push it. Stretch it out there and push it down. Find another grab it. Try not to tear it. Don't tear those glutens. Just stretch it out there and press it down. It doesn't need much. Just do that, turn it around in the bowl. Easiest way to do it I found. And then we're going to set it aside for another half an hour. And a half an hour, so this has been the first half hour, and there's a second, third, and fourth. And then by that time, it's putting up a fight when you grab it. It's and even in the last phases, I'll show you later, but in the last phases, I'm just pulling it out there, folding it over there gently. I'm just loving it. Now, if you're not willing to love this bread, to love this dough, to love this process, go to the friggin' grocery store, okay? It's not gonna work out for you. It's just not gonna work out. If you don't put love into what you're doing here, if you don't put your intention into what you're doing here, it's just not gonna work out. You're gonna fail in your efforts to make this bread from time to time. And every once in a while, it's just, you know, you end up with focaccia or you end up with pita bread or something. You fail. But if you don't love it, you're never gonna succeed. You have to love the bread.